It was 2 o'clock in the morning when my world fell apart. I heard the voice of my daughter-in-law, Victoria, through the phone. "We're taking her to the nursing home tomorrow. It's all arranged." My blood ran cold. I grabbed only my purse and escaped through the back door. The next day, they were desperately looking for me, but it was already too late for regrets. My name is Margaret. I am 70 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have lived in the house of my son Daniel and his wife Victoria. I thought it was my home. I thought they were my family. How wrong I was. It all started when I was widowed. Daniel showed up at my door with tears in his eyes, telling me he couldn't leave me alone, that he was my only family, that he needed me close. His words moved me so much that I sold my condo and moved in with them. At first, everything seemed perfect. Daniel treated me with affection. Victoria smiled when she saw me, and I felt useful helping with the housework and taking care of them. But slowly, very slowly, the smiles began to fade. The sweet words became sharp. The hugs turned into empty gestures. And I, like a fool, kept believing it was just a rough patch, that things would get better. Victoria was the first to show her true colors. It started with seemingly innocent comments. "Margaret, don't you think you're eating a bit too much? Or, maybe you should stay in your room when we have guests. The house looks tidier that way." Daniel never contradicted her. Even worse, he started to back her up. "Mom, Victoria is right. It's better if you get more rest." Rest. That was their favorite word when they wanted me to disappear. The months passed, and the humiliations intensified. Victoria stopped cooking for me. "If you want something special to eat, you can make it yourself," she would tell me with that fake smile she had perfected. Daniel would pretend not to notice when he came home from work and found my empty plate on the table while they finished their dinner. "Did you eat, Mom?" he would ask distractedly, not really waiting for an answer. One night, while I was washing the dishes after they had gone to their room, I heard their voices through the wall. "You can't keep this up forever," Victoria was saying. "She's too much of a burden." "I know," Daniel replied, "but she's my mother." "Exactly, she's your mother, not mine, and I didn't marry you to become a full-time nurse for the elderly." My hands trembled as I held the plate. A nurse for the elderly? That's what she thought of me. Not a mother-in-law, not a grandmother to her future children, but a burden. The following weeks were hell. Victoria began to treat me as if I were invisible. She would walk past me without even a glance. When I spoke to her, she would respond with one-word answers or simply ignore me. Daniel was no better. He would come home from work, kiss Victoria, and greet me with a nod as if I were a stranger in his own house. But what hurt the most was the way they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear them. "She's getting slower," Victoria would say. "Yesterday it took her an hour to do something that would normally take 20 minutes. Maybe we should look into some options," Daniel would reply with a hesitant voice. Options. That word haunted me during sleepless nights. What kind of options? I didn't dare to ask, but something inside me already knew the answer. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to find out, was that I had my own secrets. Secrets I kept like cards up my sleeve for the day I would need them. During my 60 years of marriage, my late husband and I had been very careful with our money. We had properties, investments, savings accounts that had grown silently over the years. When I sold my condo to move in with Daniel, I didn't spend that money. I invested it, and it had grown. A lot. Furthermore, there was something else they were completely unaware of. Something that could change everything if I ever decided to reveal it. But that night, that damned August night, while I was pretending to sleep in my small room at the end of the hall, I heard footsteps in the kitchen. It was Victoria, talking on the phone in a low voice. I got up silently and walked to my bedroom door. Her words reached my ears like daggers. "Yes, I've already spoken with the director. She can take her in tomorrow. Daniel agrees. We just need her to sign the papers." A pause. My heart was beating so loudly I was afraid she could hear it. "No, she doesn't know anything. Tomorrow we'll tell her it's just a visit, to see the place. Once she's there, it will be easier to convince her to stay." Another, longer pause. "Do I feel bad? Please. We've been putting up with her for 5 years. It's time for her to live her own life in the place where she belongs." My knees almost buckled. The nursing home. They were going to take me to a nursing home, without consulting me, without giving me a choice, as if I were a piece of old furniture they wanted to get rid of. In that moment, I knew I had to act. I couldn't just stay there waiting for morning to come and for them to drag me away like an animal to the slaughter. Very slowly, I returned to my room and grabbed my purse. Inside were my most important documents, some cash, and my phone. It was all I needed for now. I waited until I heard Victoria go upstairs and close her bedroom door. Then, like a thief in my own house, I tiptoed to the back door. The night air was cool against my skin. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath and felt something akin to freedom. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was never going to be anyone's victim again. I walked through the dark streets for an hour before catching a cab. I gave the driver the address of the most elegant hotel in the city. If they were going to treat me like a homeless person, it was time to remind them who I really was. The receptionist looked at me strangely when I arrived at 3 a.m. with only a purse, but my credit card spoke for itself. The presidential suite, for 2 nights to start. I sat on that king-sized bed, in that room that cost more per night than Daniel earned in a week, and for the first time in years, I truly smiled. At 6 a.m, my phone started ringing. Daniel. I let it ring. He called again, and again, and again. Then the text started coming. Mom, where are you? We're worried. Please answer. Worried? What a convenient word. By 8, Victoria had also started calling. Her voice on the voicemails sounded hysterical. Margaret, please come back. We don't know what happened. Daniel is desperate. Desperate? Probably because they realized their nursing home plan had been ruined. I ordered room service, eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, fresh fruit, Colombian coffee. As I ate on the terrace of my suite overlooking the city, I imagined Daniel and Victoria running around the house, searching for me in every corner, calling hospitals, maybe even the police. Let them worry. Let them feel even a fraction of the anguish I had felt for years. After breakfast, I made some important calls. The first was to my bank. I wanted to know exactly how much money I had available. The figure surprised even me. The investments had performed better than I had expected. The second call was more delicate. I dialed the number of Benjamin Carter, the best family law attorney in the city. I knew him because he had handled my husband's will years ago. Mrs. Margaret? His voice sounded surprised. How are you? I need to see you urgently, Benjamin. I have a complicated family situation. Of course. Can you come in this afternoon? I'll be there. The third call was the most important of all. I dialed a number I had saved for more than 5 years since I moved in with Daniel. It was Lauren, my old friend and real estate agent. Margaret, what a surprise to hear from you. How are you, dear? Lauren, I need you to do a very special favor for me. Do you remember that property downtown you saw years ago? The one you said would be perfect for me if I ever decided to be independent again? While we talked, my phone kept vibrating with missed calls. Daniel had called 14 times, Victoria 8. They had even managed to find my late husband's number, which I still kept as an emergency contact, and had called there. How desperate it must be to not be able to control someone when you're used to manipulating them. At 2 in the afternoon, I went down to the hotel lobby dressed in my best pearl gray suit and my most elegant leather shoes. I had made an appointment at the hotel's beauty salon. Manicure, pedicure, cut and style. If I was going to start a war, I would do it looking impeccable. The stylist, a young woman named Katie, looked at me curiously. Special occasion, ma'am? You could say that, I replied. It's the first day of the rest of my life. While Katie worked on my hair, I reflected on the last 5 years. How had I allowed them to treat me like that? When had I stopped valuing myself? The answer was painful but clear. From the moment I thought being a burden was better than being alone. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had money, I had resources, and most importantly, I had the truth on my side. At 4 in the afternoon, I arrived at Benjamin's office. It was on the 25th floor of a skyscraper in the financial district. The windows overlooked the entire city, and from there I could see the neighborhood where Daniel lived. Margaret, you look splendid, Benjamin said as he poured me a coffee. But something tells me this isn't a social visit. I told him everything, the conversation I had overheard, the nursing home plan, my nighttime escape. Benjamin took notes while I spoke, his expression growing more serious with each detail. This is very serious, Margaret. What they plan to do could constitute elder abuse, especially if they intended to do it without your consent. What are my options? Many. But first, I need you to tell me something. Do they know about your real financial situation? Number, they have no idea. Daniel thinks I'm a poor widow living off his charity. Benjamin smiled for the first time in the meeting. Then we have a considerable advantage. He explained the legal options: restraining orders, lawsuits for emotional abuse, even criminal charges if we could prove they had planned to commit me against my will. But I have a different proposal, he continued. What if we teach them a lesson they will never forget? His eyes sparkled with a glint that I immediately liked. I'm all ears, Benjamin. We are going to show them exactly what the woman they thought they could discard is worth. But we will do it in a way that the blow is public, definitive, and completely legal. I left that office with a plan that would take a few weeks to execute, but would be worth every minute of the wait. Back at the hotel, I finally decided to answer one of Daniel's calls. Mom, thank God. Where are you? We've been looking for you everywhere. Victoria is crying. We thought something terrible had happened to you. His voice sounded genuinely concerned. He almost convinced me. Almost. I'm fine, Daniel. I just needed to go for a walk and clear my head. A walk? It's been more than 12 hours. Where are you exactly? In a safe place. Don't worry about me. Mom, please, come home. We can talk about whatever is bothering you. Talk. As if it were that simple. You know what, Daniel? You're right. We do need to talk. But not on the phone, in person, and when I'm ready. When will that be? Soon. Very soon. I hung up before he could reply. That night, as I had lobster for dinner in my suite overlooking the city lights, I toasted to myself, to the woman I had been, to the woman I was reclaiming, and to the woman I was becoming. Daniel and Victoria had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the wrong woman. The following days were a mix of strategic preparation and personal rediscovery. Every morning I would wake up in that luxury suite, order my breakfast to the room, and work on my battle plan. While Daniel and Victoria kept calling, desperately, their messages had evolved from concern to pleading, and then to something that sounded dangerously close to veiled threats. Mom, this isn't funny anymore, Daniel said in his last message. Victoria is sick with nerves. You need to come back right now, or we will have to take more drastic measures. More drastic measures? Like taking me to the nursing home by force? How predictable they were. But there was something they didn't know, something I had discovered during my conversations with Benjamin. It turns out that the house where they had lived all these years, the house Daniel considered his, actually had a more complicated history. When my husband died, he left that property in a trust under my name. Daniel could live there as long as I was alive and consented, but technically, legally, the house was mine. He never bothered to read the full will documents. Why would he? After all, I was just his poor widowed mother who depended on his generosity. On the 4th day of my disappearance, I decided it was time to begin the next phase. Lauren had found the perfect apartment, a penthouse in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, fully furnished, with 24-hour concierge service. Margaret, this place is a dream, she told me as we toured the apartment. 2 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a terrace with a hot tub, and the most spectacular view in the entire city. When can I move in? Whenever you want. The owner is desperate to rent it to someone reliable. I signed the lease that same afternoon, 2 years, paid in advance, in cash. After leaving the real estate office, I took a taxi to the most elegant shopping mall in the city. It was time to renew my wardrobe. For years, I had dressed like the poor widow they thought I was. Worn-out clothes, dull colors, comfortable but styleless shoes. Today, that ended. At the most exclusive boutique, a saleswoman named Katie attended to me with that mix of professional courtesy and slight disdain reserved for customers who didn't look like they could afford the merchandise. How can I help you, ma'am? I need a completely new wardrobe, business suits, cocktail dresses, shoes, accessories, everything. Her expression changed slightly when I pulled out my black card. 2 hours later, I walked out of there with 8 bags full of clothes that cost more than Daniel earned in 3 months. Dresses in shades of emerald, cherry red, gold, deep violet. I would never wear sad colors again. That night, as I was packing my new acquisitions, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Margaret? This is Inspector Marcus Riley from the city police. Your son Daniel filed a missing person report. Could you confirm that you are okay? Interesting. They had escalated the drama to involve the police. Inspector, I am perfectly fine. I am in full command of my mental faculties, and I decided to take a vacation. There is no disappearance to investigate. Could you tell me where you are exactly? Your son is very worried. I am in the city, in a safe place. Inspector, I want it on the record that I left that house of my own free will, and that I do not wish to be contacted until I am ready. Understood, ma'am. Is there anything else you need? Yes. If my son or his wife file any more false reports about me, I want them to know that I might consider it harassment. The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. The next day, I moved into the penthouse. The movers arrived at the hotel at 8 in the morning to transport my few belongings. It was strange how little I needed when it was really about starting over. My new home was everything Lauren had promised, and more. From the terrace, I could see the entire city spread out at my feet. I poured myself a glass of red wine and toasted to my new independence. But the real satisfaction came that afternoon, when I finally decided to answer one of Daniel's calls. Mom, thank God. The police told us you're okay, but we need to see you. Where are you exactly? I'm at my new home, Daniel. Your new home? What are you talking about? I moved. I got my own apartment. A long silence. With what money? Mom, you don't have the resources to live alone. You need to come home before you do something you'll regret. My home? Interesting that you use that word. What do you mean? Nothing, son. Just that it's funny how sometimes words reveal more than we intend. Mom, you're talking strangely. Victoria says maybe you need medical help. We could take you to a doctor for a checkup. There it was, the real Victoria surfacing. Victoria says that. How thoughtful of her to be concerned about my mental health. She just wants what's best for you. We all want what's best for you. Like taking me to a nursing home? The silence that followed was deafening. What are you talking about? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Daniel. Mom, we never. Never what? Never planned to commit me without my consent? Never discussed how convenient it would be to get rid of the burden I represent? I don't know where you heard that, but I heard it from your wife's lips, Daniel. At 2 o'clock in the morning, on the phone, arranging my fate as if I were a piece of old furniture to be discarded. Another long, tense silence. Mom, if you overheard something out of context? Out of context? We're taking her to the nursing home tomorrow. It's all arranged. What context could possibly make those words mean something different? We were just exploring options. Without consulting me. We thought it would be for the best. You thought it would be more convenient. For you, it's not like that. Then explain it to me, Daniel. Explain how planning to commit your mother without her knowledge is an act of love. He couldn't, because there was no explanation that could justify the unjustifiable. I want to see you, he finally said. We need to talk in person. I agree, but it will be when I decide. Where I decide. And on my terms. When? Soon, son. Very soon. And when we do see each other, you're going to discover a few things about your poor, widowed mother that are going to surprise you very much. I hung up before he could respond. That night, as I had dinner on my terrace under the stars, I called Benjamin. How is our project coming along? Better than expected, Margaret. I have some very interesting information about Daniel and Victoria's finances. Apparently, they've been living beyond their means for years. How far beyond? Credit card debt, personal loans, a late mortgage. They've been using your presence in the house to justify expenses they can't afford. Interesting. There's more. Apparently, Victoria has been telling her friends that you have senile dementia, and that's why you need special care. She's been building a narrative to justify the nursing home. My blood boiled. Do you have proof of that? I'm gathering it. Margaret, When we're done with this, they are going to regret ever messing with you." I hung up with a smile on my lips. Daniel and Victoria had no idea what was coming for them. A week after moving into the penthouse, I had established my new routine. Breakfast on the terrace, a workout in the building's gym, afternoons working with Benjamin on our master plan. For the first time in years, I felt alive, powerful, in control of my destiny. Daniel had stopped calling after our last conversation. Victoria, on the other hand, had intensified her attempts. Her voicemails revealed a growing desperation. "Margaret, please, come back. Daniel is a mess. He's barely eating, barely sleeping. This is destroying us as a family." As a family? What irony. "Margaret, I know you're angry, but running away doesn't solve anything. We're adults. We can talk like civilized people." Civilized people, like when they were planning to commit me without my consent. But the message that caught my attention the most arrived on a Thursday night. "Margaret, I need to be honest with you. Daniel is considering reporting you as mentally incompetent. He says your behavior proves you can't make rational decisions. Please, come back before this gets out of control." There was the real Victoria, the veiled threat wrapped in false concern. I forwarded the message to Benjamin immediately. "Perfect," he said when I called him. "This is exactly what we needed. They're digging their own grave." "How so?" "If Daniel tries to have you declared mentally incompetent, we would have grounds for a lawsuit for defamation and elder abuse. But more importantly, it would be the perfect time to reveal your true financial situation. Do you have everything ready for phase 2? "Everything is prepared. Are you sure you want to do this in public?" "Absolutely. I want it to be as humiliating for them as it was for me to hear their plans that night." The plan was simple, yet devastating. Lauren had organized a luxury property exhibition at the most exclusive hotel in the city. Daniel and Victoria had been specifically invited with the excuse that there was an investment opportunity that might interest them. What they didn't know was that I would be the event's keynote speaker. The day arrived faster than expected. I dressed in my new emerald-colored suit, high heels, and jewelry I had bought especially for the occasion. In the mirror, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Elegant, powerful, intimidating. I arrived at the hotel an hour before the guests. The ballroom was perfectly prepared. Tables with property information, canapes, champagne, and a giant screen where the presentations would be projected. Lauren was checking the final details when Benjamin arrived with a portfolio full of documents. "Ready for the show?" he asked me. "More than ready." At 7, the guests began to arrive. Business people, investors, wealthy individuals who were genuinely interested in the properties. And then, at 7:30, I saw them walk in. Daniel was wearing his only good suit, the one he wore for weddings and funerals. Victoria had tried to look elegant in a red dress she had probably bought on sale. They looked completely out of place among the city's financial elite. I watched them from the other side of the ballroom as they looked for whoever had invited them. Their faces showed a mix of nervousness and excitement. They probably thought someone had recognized their investment potential. Lauren went up to the small stage to give the welcome speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our exclusive exhibition of premium properties. Tonight, we have the honor of presenting a carefully chosen selection of the best real estate investments in the city." Daniel and Victoria were smiling nervously, trying to blend in with the other guests. "But before we begin with the properties," Lauren continued, "I want to introduce you to an extraordinary woman, a visionary investor who has recently decided to significantly expand her real estate portfolio. Please, let's welcome Mrs. Margaret Vance." The audience's applause accompanied me as I walked onto the stage. From my elevated position, I could perfectly see Daniel and Victoria's faces. First, confusion. What was their poor, widowed mother doing at a luxury investment event? Then, recognition. It was really me, but transformed, elegant, speaking with confidence in front of an elite audience. Finally, horror, as they began to understand the implications of what they were seeing. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and firm. "Over the last 5 years, I have learned a lot about the true value of things. Above all, I have learned that sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who know us the least." I looked directly at where Daniel and Victoria were standing. Their faces had lost all color. I have decided to share my story with you because I believe it perfectly illustrates why it is so important to maintain our financial independence, regardless of our age. The audience listened attentively. Some had already noticed where I was directing my gaze. 5 years ago, I decided to move in with my son and his wife. I sold my property and thought it would be wonderful to live as a family. What I did not expect was to discover that my presence had become a burden to them. A murmur went through the ballroom. This was not the typical investment presentation they were expecting. 2 weeks ago, I happened to overhear a phone conversation. My daughter-in-law was arranging for me to be committed to a nursing home without my knowledge or consent. "We're taking her to the nursing home tomorrow. It's all arranged." Those were her exact words. The murmur intensified. Some guests began to look around, trying to identify the protagonists of the story. Daniel tried to move toward the exit, but Victoria stopped him. She probably thought that running away would confirm their guilt. That night, I made a decision. Instead of becoming a victim of their plan, I decided to remind them of something they had completely forgotten. I paused dramatically. That the woman they planned to discard as a nuisance had her own resources, considerable resources. Benjamin appeared beside the stage with the portfolio of documents. "Tonight, I have purchased 3 properties from this exhibition," I continued. "A penthouse in the financial district, a country house in the mountains, and a commercial building downtown. Total investment, $2 million. In cash." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Daniel looked as if he was about to faint. Victoria's mouth was wide open. "I want this to serve as a lesson for everyone present," I continued. "Never underestimate older people. And never, ever assume you know someone's true situation." I came down from the stage to thunderous applause. The audience was fascinated by the drama they had just witnessed. I walked directly toward Daniel and Victoria. Other guests had already realized who they were and were looking at them with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "Hello, son," I said in a calm voice. "Surprised to see me?" Daniel looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. His face had gone from white to red and then to a sickly green. Victoria, on the other hand, looked like a marble statue, completely paralyzed. "Mom," Daniel whispered, What is all this?" "This, my son, is reality. The reality that you two never bothered to get to know." The other guests began to gather discreetly, pretending to look at property brochures while listening to our conversation. The drama was too juicy to ignore. "Mrs. Margaret," Lauren intervened with a malicious smile, "are these the relatives you told me about? The ones who thought you needed a special care?" Victoria finally found her voice. "Margaret, I don't understand anything. Since when do you have so much money?" "Since always, my dear Victoria. It's just that you assumed I was a poor, helpless widow. You never asked. You were never interested in really knowing my situation." Daniel tried to approach. "Mom, if you had resources, why didn't you tell us?" "We could have." "We could have what, Daniel? Treated me with respect, consulted me before planning my life? Or you simply would have found more creative ways to take advantage?" An older man who had been listening came over. "Excuse me, ma'am, but is it true that they planned to commit you without your consent?" "Completely true," I replied without taking my eyes off Daniel. "My daughter-in-law arranged everything over the phone. It's all arranged," were her words. The man shook his head in disgust. "That's elder abuse. They should be in jail." Victoria turned as red as a tomato. "That's not true. We only wanted what was best for her. We thought she needed more care." "Care?" My voice rose slightly. "Like ignoring me during dinners? Like making me feel invisible in my own house? Like arguing about how annoying my presence was?" More people had gathered around us. Some were discreetly recording with their phones. "Margaret, please," Daniel pleaded. "People are staring at us. We can discuss this in private." "In private? Like when you discussed my future in private, without including me?" Benjamin appeared at my side with a folder. "Mrs. Margaret, would you like me to show them the documents now?" "What documents?" Victoria asked nervously. "The documents that prove that the house you've been living in for these 5 years is legally mine," I replied calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked as if he had been slapped. What are you saying? I'm saying that when your father died, he left that property in a trust under my name. You can live there as long as I'm alive and I consent, but technically, legally, the house is mine. Victoria staggered. That can't be true. Benjamin opened the folder and showed the documents. These are the trust papers, duly registered and notarized. Mrs. Margaret is the legal owner of the property. Daniel took the documents with trembling hands. But I thought, Dad told me the house would be mine. Your father told you that you could live there and take care of me. That's not the same as being the owner. An elegant woman who had been listening came closer. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Julia Vance, from the city's financial newspaper. Would you be willing to give an interview about your story? Of course, I replied. I think it's important for people to know what can happen to senior citizens when family makes the wrong assumptions. Daniel grabbed my arm. Mom, please don't make this public. We can sort this out among ourselves. I gently freed myself from his grip. Like when you sorted out my future among yourselves, without consulting me, without including me, treating me like an object to be disposed of. It wasn't like that? Victoria shouted, completely losing her composure. We took care of you for 5 years. We gave you a roof over your head, food, everything you needed. You gave me? My voice turned icy. You gave me a roof over my head in my own house? The murmur of indignation from those present was audible. Several were clearly on the side of the elegant older woman who had been betrayed by her own family. Mrs. Margaret, the journalist said, what are your plans now? Very simple, I replied with a smile. I am going to live my life on my own terms, in my own home, with my own money. And I am going to make sure my story serves as a warning to other seniors who may be in similar situations. Daniel looked completely defeated. And what about us? Where are we going to live? That, I said as I walked towards the exit, is an excellent question. One you should have asked yourselves before you planned on sending me to a nursing home. The following days were a whirlwind of media activity. The story of the betrayed millionaire grandmother had gone viral on social media. The videos from the event had been shared thousands of times, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests. But the most satisfying part was watching Daniel and Victoria try to manage their public image. Victoria had created an Instagram account where she tried to tell her side of the story. People don't understand, she said in her tearful videos. We love Margaret like family. We only wanted what was best for her. Modern nursing homes are beautiful places where seniors can socialize and receive professional care. Her followers didn't believe a word of it. The comments were ruthless. Without consulting her? At 2 a.m? That's not love, it's abuse. And why didn't you know she had money? Weren't you interested in actually getting to know the woman you lived with? My grandmother always says, the family that betrays you once will betray you always. I do's. Daniel had opted for a different strategy. He had started calling me directly, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Mom, this is getting out of control. Victoria is getting threats online. People recognize us on the street and insult us. Please, say something publicly to calm things down. Calm things down? After 5 years of humiliation, they wanted me to defend them publicly? The message that struck me the most arrived a week after the event. Mom, we lost our jobs. Victoria was fired because the story reached her office. I was asked to resign because my family situation was affecting the company's image. We don't have money to pay rent if we have to move. Please help us. Help them. Funny how their tone changed when they needed something. That afternoon, I had the most important interview scheduled so far. The most watched morning television show in the country. Julia had arranged for it to be live. From my penthouse, to showcase my new life. I prepared carefully a violet dress, elegant jewelry, perfect makeup. When the camera crew arrived, my apartment looked like something out of a decorating magazine. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Good morning. I'm Julia Vance, and I'm here with Margaret Vance, the woman whose story has moved the entire country. Margaret, tell us, how do you feel after everything that has happened? Julia, I feel free for the first time in 5 years. Free to live without apologizing for existing. Free to make my own decisions. Free to be treated with the respect I deserve. Your daughter-in-law Victoria has been giving interviews saying that you only wanted to protect her. that the nursing home was for your well-being. Julia, when someone plans your future without consulting you secretly in the middle of the night, that's not protection, that's control. And when they have also been treating you like a burden for years, it's hard to believe their motives were truly altruistic. What would you say to other seniors who might be going through similar situations? I would tell them that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, that you shouldn't let anyone make you feel like a burden, and above all, to maintain control over your own lives and finances. Now, we understand that your son Daniel has been trying to contact you. Yes, he has been calling, especially since they lost their jobs. And what do you plan to do about it? Look, Julia, I'm not a vengeful person, but I'm not a foolish person either. For 5 years, Daniel and Victoria treated me as if I were invisible when they thought I depended on them. Now that they've discovered I have my own resources, suddenly I'm important again. Are you willing to reconcile with them? A real reconciliation requires a genuine acknowledgement of the harm caused. It requires sincere apologies, and it requires real changes in behavior. So far, all I've received are excuses and justifications. Victoria says the consequences have been disproportionate, that losing their jobs is too much of a punishment. Disproportionate? My voice hardened slightly. You know what's disproportionate? Planning to commit someone without their consent, that is disproportionate. What are your plans for the future? I'm considering creating a foundation to help seniors facing family abuse. I want my experience to serve to protect others. One last question. Margaret, do you regret anything? I thought carefully before answering. I regret allowing them to treat me badly for so long. I regret wasting 5 years feeling like a burden, when in reality I was an independent and capable woman. But I do not regret taking back control of my life. When the interview ended, my phone exploded with messages. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking out, offering support. But the message that caught my attention the most came from an unknown number. Mrs. Margaret, this is Stephen Clark, an investigative journalist. I have information about your son's finances that I think you would be interested in knowing. Could we talk? I smiled as I dialed the number. Daniel and Victoria hadn't seen anything yet. The meeting with Stephen was revealing in ways I hadn't expected. He arrived at my penthouse with a folder full of documents and a serious expression that immediately put me on alert. Mrs. Margaret, after your television interview, I decided to investigate your family's situation more deeply. What I found is disturbing. He sat across from me in the living room and opened the folder on the glass table. For the last 5 years, Daniel and Victoria have been using your presence in the house to obtain credits and loans they couldn't have gotten otherwise. What do you mean exactly? They submitted documents declaring you as a financially dependent person with mental health issues. This allowed them to access government assistance programs, tax deductions for elder care, and preferential loans. My blood began to run cold. They financially benefited from pretending I had mental problems? Exactly. Here are the tax returns for the last 3 years. They received deductions for medical expenses that never existed, subsidies for elder care they never really provided, and several loans they justified by saying they needed the money for your care expenses. I reviewed the documents in disbelief. There were fake medical bills, receipts for medications I had never taken, even reports from a psychiatrist who was supposedly treating me for senile dementia. How did you get all this? I have contacts in various institutions. When a story like yours becomes public, sometimes people who were previously silent decide to speak up. Stephen pulled out more papers. But there's something more serious. Victoria has been running a blog for 2 years where she documents her heroic struggle caring for her mother-in-law with dementia. He showed me printouts of the blog. The title was Living with Margaret, a devoted daughter-in-law's diary. I read some entries with growing horror. Today, Margaret had another episode. She couldn't remember where she put her medicine and blamed me for hiding it. It's so hard to stay patient when the illness makes her so aggressive. Daniel is exhausted. Working all day and then coming home to deal with his mother's mood swings is wearing him down. But we carry on, out of love. The doctors say Margaret's condition is only going to get worse. We're considering professional care options. It's heartbreaking, but perhaps it's for the best for everyone. Is all of this made up? I asked. though I already knew the answer. Completely fabricated. But here's the interesting part. The blog has generated income. It has sponsors, affiliate links, even a donation account to help with Margaret's medical expenses. How much money have they made from this? Approximately $15,000 over the last 2 years. I was speechless. They hadn't just planned to get rid of me. They had been profiting from lies about my mental health for years. There's more, Stephen continued. Victoria also created a profile on a crowdfunding platform 6 months ago. They were raising money to renovate the house and make it safer for a person with dementia. How much did they raise? $8,000 so far. It was too much. I got up from my seat and walked to the window. The city view that usually calmed me now felt blurred by rage. What can I do legally with this information? A lot. Fraud, swindling, misappropriation, defamation. We could build a solid case that could result in criminal charges. My phone rang at that moment. It was Daniel, probably calling for the 15th time that week. This time I decided to answer. Yes? Mom, thank God you answered. We need to talk urgently. I'm busy, Daniel. Mom, please. Victoria is having panic attacks. The harassers online are posting our address. Last night someone threw eggs at the house. What a shame. Mom, we are your family. You can't be okay with this happening to us. My family? The family that diagnosed me with senile dementia without my knowledge to obtain financial benefits? A long silence. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Victoria's blog. I'm talking about the false tax returns. I'm talking about the loans you got by lying about my mental condition. Mom, I don't know anything about that. You don't know anything about the blog Living with Margaret, where your wife documents my supposed dementia episodes? You don't know anything about the donations you've been receiving for my medical care? You don't know anything about the fake medical bills you submitted to get tax deductions? This time the silence was deafening. Daniel, I have an investigative journalist sitting right here with documents that prove everything I've just said. Do you want to keep lying? Mom, if there was anything irregular, it was Victoria's idea. I didn't know the details. You didn't know the details of stealing money using my name? You didn't know the details of inventing a mental illness I don't have? Victoria said it was legal. She said that since you lived with us, we were entitled to those benefits. And the blog? Was it also legal to lie publicly about my mental health to make money? Mom, I didn't read the blog. Victoria handled those things. Daniel, do you know what the difference is between you and me? What? When I make a mistake, I own it and take responsibility. You, on the other hand, always find someone else to blame. Mom, please, can we fix this? No, Daniel, we can't. This gets fixed with justice. I hung up and looked at Stephen. When can we file the lawsuits? The lawsuits were filed on a Tuesday morning. Benjamin had worked all night to prepare the documents. Tax fraud, swindling, defamation, identity theft, and elder abuse. It was a legal arsenal that would leave Daniel and Victoria with no escape. But before the documents reached their hands, I had one last card to play. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? Stephen asked me as he set up the recording equipment in my living room. Completely sure. The people who donated money believing Victoria's lies deserve to know the truth. We had decided to do a live broadcast on social media. In just 2 hours, more than 50,000 people had registered to watch. The story had captured the nation's attention. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon. I am Margaret Vance, and today I am going to share information with you that will completely change what you thought about my family situation. I looked directly at the camera. Over the last few days, an investigative journalist has discovered that my son and daughter-in-law have been lying about my mental health for years to obtain financial benefits. I held up a copy of Victoria's blog. My daughter-in-law Victoria created a blog called Living with Margaret, where she invented a completely false version of my life. According to her writings, I suffer from senile dementia, have aggressive episodes, and require constant medical care. None of this is true. As you can see in this broadcast, I am in perfect mental condition. I manage my own finances. I live independently, and I make all my own decisions without help. I read one of the blog entries. Today, Margaret had another episode. She couldn't remember where she put her medicine and blamed me for hiding it. This entry is dated on a day I was in New York, closing a real estate investment. The live comments multiplied by the second. People were outraged. But the lie goes beyond the blog. Using these false stories, they obtained tax deductions for non-existent medical expenses, government subsidies for elder care they never provided, and donations from well-intentioned people who believed their narrative. I showed the tax documents. In total, they have obtained approximately $25,000 by lying about my mental condition. My phone started ringing insistently. It was Daniel, probably watching the broadcast in a panic. "I see my son is trying to call me right now," I said, showing the phone to the camera, probably to ask me to stop this broadcast. I decided to answer and put it on speaker. "Mom, please, stop that broadcast. You're destroying our lives." "Hello, Daniel. I'm live with 50,000 people. Is there anything you want to say publicly about Victoria's blog and the money you obtained by lying about my health?" "Mom, I didn't know you were live. Hang up right now." "Why should I hang up? Are you afraid of people hearing your side of the story?" "This is all Victoria's fault. I didn't know anything about the blog. She handled those things." The comments exploded. People couldn't believe he was blaming his wife live on air. "Daniel, so you admit that Victoria lied about my mental condition?" I don't know what to admit. Just stop the broadcast." "Do you admit that you received money under false pretenses?" "Mom, please." "It's a simple question, Daniel. Yes or no?" A long silence. Then we heard Victoria's voice, shouting in the background. "Hang up! Don't say anything else." "Is that Victoria?" I asked. "Does she want to join the conversation? I'm sure the 50,000 people watching us would have some interesting questions for her." "No!" Victoria screamed. "Daniel, hang up now." "Victoria," I said, raising my voice, "could you explain to the audience why you invented stories about my dementia? Could you explain how you justify the money you earned with those lies? You have no right to ruin our lives like this." Victoria shouted, grabbing the phone. "I have no right? After you ruined mine for 5 years? We took care of you. We gave you a home." "Victoria, I'm reading your blog live. It says here I had a violent episode on March 15th. Could you explain what happened that day?" That was because it turns out on that day I was in Miami, visiting my investment broker. I have receipts, photos, witnesses. Those details don't matter. They don't matter? Lying about someone's mental health doesn't matter? You abandoned us? You disappeared in the night like a thief. "Victoria, I left because I overheard your phone conversation planning to commit me to a nursing home without my consent. It was for the best. The best for me, or the most convenient for you?" The call was abruptly cut off. The comments went wild. People were virtually applauding, sharing the broadcast, expressing their support. "As you can see," I continued calmly, "it's hard to maintain lies when you're confronted with real evidence. This broadcast isn't just about my personal story. It's about something much bigger, the systematic abuse of senior citizens by family members who take advantage of their perceived vulnerability. Tomorrow, my lawyers will file formal lawsuits against Daniel and Victoria for fraud, swindling, and defamation. All the money they obtained fraudulently will be returned to the corresponding institutions and to the people who donated, believing their lies. But more important than legal justice is moral justice. I want my story to serve as a warning. Never let anyone take away your dignity, no matter how old you are or how vulnerable you may seem. Thank you for joining me today. I will keep you informed about the progress of the legal case. I ended the broadcast with over 80,000 viewers. My phone immediately exploded with messages of support, interview offers, and contacts from other seniors sharing their own stories. But the message that satisfied me the most came an hour later. It was from the crowdfunding platform, informing me that they had closed Victoria's account and frozen the funds pending distribution. Justice was finally beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my penthouse enjoying my morning coffee while reading the day's news. The front page of the local newspaper had a headline that made me smile. "Couple sentenced to prison for fraud against a senior citizen. Daniel had received 2 years in prison. Victoria, as the mastermind of the scheme, had received 3.5 years. In addition, they would have to pay a $50,000 fine and perform community service in nursing homes once they completed their sentences. Justice had been complete and satisfying. But the most rewarding part was not their punishment, but what I had built with my freedom. The Margaret Vance Foundation for the Protection of Seniors had already helped over 200 people in situations similar to mine. We had established a helpline, free legal services, and a financial education program for older adults. My story had inspired changes in state legislation on elder abuse. It was now more difficult for family members to obtain fraudulent benefits, and there were stronger protections for vulnerable seniors. But perhaps most importantly, I had rediscovered myself. At 71, I had learned to dance salsa, taken painting classes, and traveled to places I had only dreamed of visiting. I had an active social life, true friends, and a renewed purpose. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Lauren, my real estate agent who had become one of my best friends. "Margaret, did you see the news? I just read about the sentencing." "Perfect." "No, not that. Did you see that Victoria tried to sell her story to a television production company?" I laughed. "Seriously? What story?" "The one about how she defrauded her mother-in-law and ended up in prison. Apparently, she wanted to make a series about the dark side of social media and how internet justice destroyed her life. The nerve. And what happened? The production company rejected the proposal after investigating the facts. Turns out they prefer stories with more sympathetic protagonists. That afternoon, I had an important meeting. I had decided to write a book about my experience, and my editor was coming to discuss the final details of the contract. "Margaret," she said as we reviewed the manuscript, "your story is powerful because it's real. There's no fictional revenge or magical justice. It's simply a woman who decided not to be a victim." That was exactly the message I wanted to convey. "Have you thought about making any contact with Daniel now that he's in prison?" "I've thought about it," I admitted, "but I've decided I have nothing to say to him until he shows real change. Empty apologies don't rebuild broken trust. And if he wanted to make amends when he gets out, he would have to start by fully acknowledging what he did, without excuses, without blaming Victoria. He would have to show that he understands the harm he caused, and he would have to accept that the relationship would never be the same." That evening, as I prepared dinner in my gourmet kitchen, I reflected on the journey I had taken. The woman who had escaped through the back door that morning had been a frightened victim. The woman cooking now was an empowered survivor. My story had proven something that many people forget. It is never too late to reclaim your life. I had learned that kindness does not mean being a doormat, that family love does not justify abuse, that age is not synonymous with vulnerability, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply to live well. My phone showed a message from a 68-year-old woman in Mexico who had seen my interview. "Mrs. Margaret, your story gave me the courage to confront my family. After 2 years of humiliation, I finally stood up for myself. Thank you for showing me that I deserve respect." Messages like that arrived daily. Each one reminded me why it had been worth making my story public. As I had dinner on my terrace, watching the city lights stretch to the horizon, I silently toasted to all the women who had found their voice after years of silence. Daniel and Victoria had thought they were discarding me like trash. Instead, they had freed me to become the best version of myself. On my desk was a photo of my late husband. I spoke to him as I did every night. "My love, I know you would be proud. I didn't let them turn me into a victim. I defended my dignity and helped others defend theirs." That night, before sleeping, I wrote in my journal, "I don't regret adopting Daniel when he was a child. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction." The next morning, I would have a new interview, another opportunity to tell my story, another chance to help someone who felt invisible in their own life. Because in the end, I had discovered that my true purpose was not to be the perfect mother or the accommodating mother-in-law. My purpose was to simply be Margaret, a whole, independent, and free woman. When I opened the door to my house that afternoon, I never imagined my own daughter would be waiting for me, her eyes blazing with fury. Jennifer was standing in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, her face completely distorted. Beside her, Mark paced back and forth like a caged animal, cell phone in hand, the veins in his neck bulging with rage. They didn't even let me close the door. "Have you lost your mind?" Jennifer shouted, advancing toward me with furious steps. My husband nearly had a heart attack at the ATM. Her words bounced off the walls, filled with a venom I knew all too well. But this time, it no longer hurt me as it had before. Mark got closer, waving his phone in my face. "Where is the money, Eleanor? What did you do?" His card was empty. There wasn't a single dollar. His voice was a desperate roar, as if something that belonged to him by right had been snatched away. But that money was mine. My pension, the fruit of 42 years working at the textile mill, getting up before sunrise, sacrificing my back and my knees. I set my purse down on the small entryway table with a calm that surprised even me. I changed my banking information, I said in a firm voice, looking both of them directly in the eye. Now my pension goes to a new card, one that only I control. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Mark froze, his face turning from bright red to a deathly white. It was as if the world had stopped for an instant. That second before the explosion we all know is coming, but no one can stop. "What? What did you say?" Jennifer stammered, bringing a hand to her chest. "Mom, you can't do that. We depend on that money. We have expenses. We have debts to pay." "Debts?" I repeated, feeling something inside me harden like steel. "Are you referring to Mark's new car? Or the vacation to Florida last month? Or maybe that giant television you bought the week before?" Mark took a step forward, his index finger pointing at me accusingly. "You live in our house. You eat our food. It's the least you can do to contribute." His words were spat out, loaded with a contempt he no longer tried to hide. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "Our house. How funny that you call it that now, when the property deeds still have my late husband's name and mine on them. This house that we bought with so much effort, brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice, is now your house in my son-in-law's vocabulary." "This is my house, Mark," I said, with a voice I didn't recognize as my own, too firm, too sure. "You two came to live here 3 years ago, remember? When you lost your apartment because you couldn't pay the rent." Jennifer let out a choked cry, as if I had slapped her. "I can't believe you're talking to me like this. I'm your daughter, your only daughter. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I knew them well. I had seen them so many times when she didn't get what she wanted. "Everything you've done for me." The words came out colder than I intended. "Tell me, Jennifer, what exactly have you done for me?" She stammered, searching the air for arguments. We give you a roof over your head. We take care of you. You take care of me," I interrupted, feeling decades of silence breaking inside me like a burst dam. "Do you take care of me when you wake me up at 6 in the morning to make breakfast? When I have to wash your clothes, iron Mark's shirts, clean the bathroom you dirty? Is that taking care of me?" Mark slammed his fist against the wall, making the wedding picture that had hung there for 45 years tremble. "You are an ungrateful, selfish old woman. Without us, you'd be rotting in some dead-end nursing home." His words should have hurt me. 6 months ago, they would have destroyed me. But today, after what I had lived through, after the humiliations I had swallowed in silence, after the nights spent crying in my room while they laughed in the living room, spending my $1,500 a month on their whims, those words bounced off me without causing any harm. "Maybe you're right," I said, picking up my purse again. "Maybe I am a selfish old woman, but this selfish old woman just got her freedom back." Jennifer collapsed onto the sofa, the same sofa I had paid for when theirs broke. Her hands trembled as she covered her face. "You can't do this to us, Mom. Please. Mark has medical treatments. I have. We have financial commitments. You're going to ruin us. I'm going to ruin you," I repeated slowly, letting each word settle in the thick air of the room. "Isn't that ironic? For 3 years, you have lived off my pension. Every dollar that I earned with my sweat and my effort. And now that I decide that money is mine again, I'm the one who's ruining you." Mark approached again, but this time there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't just rage anymore. It was fear. Real fear of losing his source of income, his personal ATM that had worked for so long without protest. "Eleanor, let's be reasonable," he said, trying to soften his tone but not quite succeeding. "We can reach an agreement. You don't have to be so drastic." I looked at this man who had entered my family 7 years ago, with his charming smile and his promises to take care of my daughter. The same man who now saw me only as a source of money, as a resource to be exploited until there was nothing left of me. "The only agreement we're going to have," I said as I walked toward the stairs leading to my room, "is that from today on, my money is mine alone. And if that bothers you, well, the door is open. You know where it is." I left them there, in the middle of the living room, with their mouths open and their plans crumbling. I climbed each step feeling an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. It had taken me 69 years to learn this lesson. That love can't be bought, that real family doesn't exploit you, and that it is never, ever too late to reclaim your dignity. Behind me, I heard Jennifer sobbing and Mark cursing under his breath. But for the first time in 3 years, those sounds no longer broke my heart. They only reminded me why I had made the most important decision of my life that morning, when I walked into the bank and said the words that would change everything. "I want to change my banking information. I need a new card, one that no one else can touch." It all began 3 years ago, at my husband Richard's funeral. I remember the smell of white carnations mixed with the aroma of coffee the neighbors had prepared for the guests. I remember Jennifer's hands squeezing mine as I watched the coffin descend, taking with it 45 years of my life, of shared laughter, of quiet breakfasts, of silly arguments and sweet reconciliations. Richard died of a massive heart attack on a Tuesday morning. He was watering the plants in the garden, those roses he loved so much, when he simply collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. The doctor told me he didn't suffer, that it was instantaneous. But I suffered. God, how I suffered. The first few months in that empty house were a silent hell. Every corner screamed his absence, his coffee mug in the cabinet, his slippers by the bed, his toothbrush, which I didn't have the courage to throw away until 6 months later. I would wake up in the pre-dawn hours, expecting to find him in the kitchen reading the newspaper, and reality would hit me every time as if it were the first. Jennifer came to visit me often at first. "Mom, you can't stay alone," she would say, sitting on the living room sofa where Richard and I had watched so many movies. "Come live with us for a while, just until you get back on your feet." Mark would nod beside her, with that smile that seemed genuine to me then, full of filial concern. I resisted for weeks. This house was my sanctuary, the place where I had raised Jennifer, where every wall held a memory. But loneliness weighed on my bones like lead. The nights became eternal. The silence was so thick I could touch it. So finally, I accepted. "Just for a little while," I told them, "until I learned to be alone again." I packed 2 suitcases with the essentials. Clothes, some photos, the green knitted shawl Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary. I closed the door of my house with a lump in my throat, promising myself I would be back soon. How naive I was, how blind I was. The first few months at Jennifer's house were bearable. She worked at a boutique downtown, and Mark was supposedly looking for a job after being fired from the insurance company where he worked. I helped with the household chores. I cooked, I cleaned. It made me feel useful, needed. I thought I was contributing to the family while I healed my broken heart. But things began to change subtly. First, it was Mark who asked to borrow $200 for a course that, according to him, would help him get a job. "I'll pay you back next month, Eleanor. I promise." He never paid it back. Then Jennifer needed $300 to pay off a credit card debt. "It's an emergency, Mom. If I don't pay, they're going to charge me sky-high interest." I never saw that money back either. At first, I didn't mind. They were my family. My only family. If my money could help them, why not? Richard always said that family came first, that money came and went, but blood ties were eternal. I believed those words as if they were gospel. One day, Mark came with a proposal. "Eleanor, I've been thinking. It would be easier if your pension went directly into our account. That way we can manage the household expenses better. You don't have to worry about anything. We'll take care of everything." He said it so naturally, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. Jennifer supported the idea immediately. "It's true, Mom. It's simpler that way. Besides, you're not good with numbers. Remember how Dad handled all the finances? We'll do the same. We'll take care of you." Their words sounded reasonable, wrapped in concern and love. Or what I believed was love. I signed the papers at the bank without reading the fine print. With faith, I gave access to my card. I handed over control of my $1,500 a month without asking questions. After all, I lived under their roof, ate their food, used their electricity. It was only fair, wasn't it? It was the right thing to do. The transformation was gradual, so slow that I didn't realize it until I was already trapped. Mark began to treat me less like a mother-in-law and more like an employee. "Eleanor, breakfast is taking too long. I'm in a hurry. Eleanor, these shirts aren't ironed well. Do them again. Eleanor, you cleaned the bathroom poorly. There are still spots on the mirror." Jennifer stopped asking me how I was. The conversations about my day, about my feelings, about my grieving process, simply disappeared. Now we only talked about pending chores, groceries I needed to buy, meals I had to prepare. I had become a shadow in that house, a useful ghost who cooked, cleaned, and paid bills without complaining. On weekends, they would go out to expensive restaurants without inviting me. "It's just that those places are very noisy. Mom, at your age, you need rest," Jennifer would say while putting on a coral-colored dress that I knew had cost at least $300, dollars that came from my pension. I would stay home, eating leftovers, watching television in the small room they had assigned me at the back of the house. One day, I found a receipt forgotten on the kitchen table. It was from a jewelry store at the most exclusive mall in the city. Mark had bought Jennifer a gold necklace for $1,200. My heart sank. While I wore the same worn-out clothes from years ago, while I denied myself basic pleasures like a new book or a pastry from the bakery I liked, they were indulging in luxuries with my money. I started to pay more attention. The nights out. The new clothes that appeared in their closets every week. The sports car Mark bought with his savings, even though he hadn't worked a single day in 2 years. It all fit together like a macabre puzzle. My pension wasn't being used for household expenses. It was financing a lifestyle they couldn't afford on their own. I tried to talk to Jennifer one night while we were washing dishes. "Honey, I've been thinking that maybe I should go back to my house. Enough time has passed since your dad died. I need to learn to live alone." My hands trembled as I rinsed a plate. She looked at me with cold eyes, so different from the warm eyes of the little girl I had raised. "Go back to your house?" "Mom, don't be silly. That house is neglected. Besides, how are you going to live alone at your age? What if you fall? What if you get sick? Here you're safe. Here you're taken care of." But in her voice, there was no love. There was only calculation. That night I cried in my small room, hugging the pillow to muffle the sobs. I missed Richard with an intensity that split me in two. He never would have allowed this. He would have defended me. But Richard was dead, buried under cold earth, and I was alone, facing a reality I didn't want to accept. My own daughter, the baby I had nursed, the girl whose knees I had patched up after every fall, the teenager whose tears I had dried after every romantic disappointment, was using me. She was squeezing me dry, as if I were an inexhaustible resource, a source of money without feelings, without dignity, without value beyond what I could provide financially. But I still didn't have the courage to do anything. I still clung to the hope that things would get better, that it was just a difficult phase, that the love we once shared would re-emerge. I lied to myself every morning when I woke up, every night when I went to bed. I swallowed the humiliation because the alternative was to accept that I had lost not only my husband, but also my daughter. Months passed, and the situation only worsened. Mark now didn't even pretend to look for work. He would get up at noon, eat the breakfast I prepared without even a thank you, and spend the rest of the day on the sofa watching sports or playing video games. Jennifer would come home from work, and instead of helping me with dinner, would lock herself in her room to talk on the phone with her friends about their upcoming vacations. One Friday night, while I was cleaning the kitchen after they went out to dinner, I found the bank statement thrown in the trash can. I pulled it out with trembling hands and unfolded it under the lamplight. My eyes scanned the lines of expenses: restaurants, bars, clothing stores, spas, gyms. In a single month, they had spent $2,800. My pension was $1,500. The rest was coming from credit cards I didn't know existed, cards that were being paid with my money from the following month. I sat down on the kitchen chair, feeling the world wobble around me. They were drowning in debt, living beyond their means, and using my pension as a bottomless pit to cover their excesses. How much longer could this last? What would happen when I could no longer pay their debts? Would they throw me out on the street like an old rag that was no longer useful? That night, lying in my narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of my small room, I made a decision. I needed to know exactly what was happening with my money. I needed to understand the magnitude of the problem before I could do anything about it. And above all, I needed to regain even a little of the control I had lost over my own life. The next morning, I got up before dawn, as always. I made the coffee, set the breakfast table, cooked scrambled eggs and toast. All on autopilot, while my mind worked on a plan. I needed information. I needed proof. I needed to see with my own eyes the extent of the theft they were committing against me. When Jennifer and Mark got up, I had already made a decision. I need to go to the bank today, I announced while pouring coffee. I have to sort out some things with your father's account that I left pending. Mark looked up from his phone with an expression of instant alarm. The bank? What do you need to go to the bank for? If you need something, I can go for you. His tone was too anxious, too controlling. It's personal business, I replied firmly, surprising myself. Documents I need to sign. Inheritance stuff. I lied without blinking, and the lie came out so naturally it almost scared me. Jennifer exchanged a worried glance with Mark. Mom, I don't think it's a good idea for you to be out alone. Let me go with you. I get off work at 3. We can go together. But I knew that if she accompanied me, I would never get the answers I needed. I'll go alone, I said. And in my voice, there was something new, something that made them back off slightly. At 10 in the morning. Don't worry about me. I grabbed my purse and left the house before they could protest further. The bank was 20 minutes away by bus. During the ride, my heart beat so hard I thought all the passengers could hear it. What was I going to discover? Did I really want to know the truth? But it was too late to turn back. I had crossed an invisible line that morning, and there was no return. At the bank, a young executive named Sarah assisted me with a professional smile. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? Her eyes were kind, without judgment, and that gave me the courage I needed. I need to see all the transactions on my account for the last 3 years, I said, my voice barely a whisper. All the deposits and all the withdrawals. I want a complete statement. Sarah nodded and began typing on her computer. After a few minutes, the printer spit out page after page of information. When it finished, there was a stack of papers nearly 50 pages thick in front of me. Would you like to review it here? Or would you prefer to take it home? She asked. I'll review it here, I replied, taking the stack with hands that were barely trembling now. I sat in one of the chairs in the waiting area and began to read. And with every page I turned, I felt my heart grow smaller, harder, colder. The numbers didn't lie. In 3 years, they had spent more than $60,000 of my pension. $60,000. The money I had earned with 42 years of work, getting up before the sun, sacrificing my health, my knees that now creaked with every step, my back that ached every night. I saw withdrawals of $500 at electronic stores, $800 at luxury restaurants, $1,000 at a jewelry store, $2,000 at a travel agency, purchases and more purchases, luxuries and more luxuries. All paid for with my effort, with my pain, with my dignity. But the worst part wasn't the large expenses. The worst part was the small details that revealed the true nature of their betrayal. Withdrawals of $20 at bars at 2 in the morning, $50 at beauty salons every week, $150 on clothes every month. While I wore the same 3 worn-out dresses I had brought from my house, while I refused to buy the medication for my arthritis because I didn't want to be a burden, they paraded around in new clothes and perfect nails. Sarah approached after an hour, a concerned expression on her face. Are you all right, ma'am? Can I get you a glass of water? It was then I realized that tears were streaming down my cheeks without me even noticing. "I'm fine," I lied, drying my tears with the back of my hand. I need to know something. Is it possible to change the banking information for my account? To have my pension deposited into a new account, a card that only I have?" Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. She had seen this before. I knew it from the way she nodded. "Of course it's possible, ma'am. And I can help you with that right now if you'd like. I just need you to show me your identification and sign a few forms." My hand moved to my purse almost of its own accord. "Yes," I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I felt. "Yes, I want to do it now. I want a new account, a new card, something that only I can touch." Sarah worked quickly and efficiently. She explained every step of the process, every form I signed. In less than an hour, I had a completely new account, with a card that would arrive at my address in 5 business days. My pension for the next month would be deposited directly there, in a place where Jennifer and Mark couldn't reach it. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" Sarah asked when we finished. There was something in her eyes, a mix of admiration and sadness, as if she understood exactly what was happening. "Yes," I said, surprising myself again. "I want extra copies of these statements, 3 complete sets. If I was going to do this, if I was going to get my life back, I needed to be prepared for what came next." I left the bank with my purse heavier, carrying not just the papers, but also a new determination. The sun was shining brighter than when I had entered, or maybe it was just that I could see it better now. For 3 years, I had lived in a fog of grief and manipulation. But that fog was dissipating, revealing an ugly but liberating truth. On the bus ride back, I hugged my purse to my chest and looked out the window. We passed the bakery where Richard used to buy me donuts on Sundays. We passed the park where Jennifer had learned to ride her bike. We passed the church where we had gotten married 45 years ago. All those memories, all those beautiful memories. And yet here I was, a 69-year-old woman, having to protect myself from my own daughter. When I got home, Jennifer was at work, and Mark was snoring on the sofa, the television on showing some football game. I went up to my room quietly and hid the papers at the bottom of my suitcase, under the underwear and old socks. No one would look there. No one would think that I, the foolish old woman who let herself be manipulated, would have the cunning to hide evidence. I sat on my bed and looked around my small room. The peeling cream-colored walls, the window that overlooked the back alley, the tiny closet where my clothes barely fit. This wasn't a room for a beloved guest. It was a utility room, a place to store the maid who cooked, cleaned, and paid the bills. But in 5 days, when my new card arrived, everything would change. In 5 days, I would begin to reclaim not only my money, but something much more valuable. My dignity, my self-worth, my right to exist as more than just a source of income for people who had forgotten what it meant to love. The next 5 days were the longest of my life. Every morning, I woke up wondering if this would be the day the card arrived. Every time I heard the mailman, my heart leaped. But I had to act normal, not raise suspicion, continue being the submissive, obedient Eleanor they expected. Mark noticed something different about me on the 3rd day. I was serving dinner when he looked at me with narrowed eyes. "You've been weird lately, Eleanor. Is something wrong with you?" His tone was accusatory, as if I had no right to have my own thoughts. "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my eyes on the plate of chicken I was serving. "Just a little tired. You know, old age." I let my shoulders slump a little more, my voice sound weaker. It was a role I had played for 3 years. A few more days wouldn't make a difference. Jennifer came home that night with shopping bags. Again, I recognized the logos of the expensive stores from the mall. "Mom, I need you to iron this lavender dress for tomorrow. I have an important dinner with some friends," she said, leaving the bags in my room as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I looked at that dress, which had probably cost $200 of my pension, and something inside me finally broke. "Why don't you iron it?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Jennifer turned to me, her eyes wide. "What did you say?" Her voice had a dangerous edge, the same tone she used as a teenager when she didn't get what she wanted. "Nothing," I hurried to say, hating myself for my cowardice but knowing I had to wait. Just 2 more days until the card arrived. 2 more days and I could stop pretending. I'll iron it after I wash the dishes. The fourth day was when I almost ruined everything. I was cleaning Jennifer and Mark's room, something I did every week, even though it killed my back, when I saw an open envelope on the desk. It was a statement for a credit card I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of prudence, and I pulled it out of the envelope. The balance was $15,000. $15,000 in debt on a card I had never seen. I reviewed the charges with trembling hands. Restaurants, trips, clothes, jewelry. A month at the beach they had taken last summer while I stayed home alone. The giant screen television in the living room, the new dining room furniture, everything had been bought on credit, and I knew exactly who was paying those credits each month. Or rather, trying to pay them. Because clearly, it wasn't enough. They were sinking into debt while draining my pension, and when my money was no longer enough, what would they do? Would they kick me out? Would they force me to sell my house to pay for their whims? I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly put the envelope back where I had found it. Mark entered the room and found me dusting the nightstand with visibly shaking hands. "What are you doing in here?" he asked suspiciously. "Cleaning," I replied without looking at him. Like every Thursday, he stood in the doorway for a long, uncomfortable moment before grunting something unintelligible and leaving. I left that room with my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to faint. It had been close, too close. On the fifth day, finally, the card arrived. I heard the mailman drop the mail in the mailbox around 11 in the morning. Jennifer was at work, and Mark had gone out to meet some friends, probably to spend more money they didn't have. I was alone. I ran to the door with an energy I hadn't felt in years. My hand was shaking so much I could barely open the mailbox. There it was, among the bills and junk mail, an official envelope from the bank, with my name on it. Just my name. Not Jennifer's. Not Mark's, mine. I opened it with clumsy fingers and took out the new card. It was silver, shining in the sunlight, and it felt like freedom in my hands. My name was engraved in elegant letters, Eleanor M. Ramirez. It wasn't just a card, it was a key to a new life. I put the envelope in my purse and went back inside the house. I had to activate the card, change the PIN, make sure everything worked correctly. I called the number that came in the instructions and followed each step meticulously. When the automated voice confirmed that my card was active and that my next pension deposit would arrive in 2 days, I felt a wave of relief so intense I had to sit down. 2 days. In 2 days. When Mark tried to withdraw money from the ATM, as he always did on the first of the month, there would be nothing. The account would be empty. And then would come the confrontation I had been postponing for 3 years. That night, Jennifer came home in a bad mood. She had had a tough day at the boutique, she said, although I suspected it had more to do with a customer returning something she had bought with my money. "Mom, what's for dinner?" she asked without even saying hello. "Roast chicken and potatoes," I replied, putting the plates on the table. Like always on Thursdays, Mark arrived shortly after, smelling of beer and with glassy eyes. He sat down at the table without washing his hands and began serving himself without waiting for me to sit. "This chicken is dry," he complained after the first bite. "Can't you cook something decent for once?" Something inside me hardened. I looked at that plate of food I had prepared with ingredients bought with my money, on a stove I had paid for, in a house that was mine. "If you don't like it," I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, "you can cook for yourself tomorrow." The silence that followed was absolute. Jennifer stopped chewing and looked at me as if I had grown a second head. Mark dropped his fork with a metallic clatter against the plate. "What did you just say?" he asked in a dangerously low voice. "You heard me," I replied, getting up from the table. "I'm tired. I'm going to my room." And I left, leaving them with their mouths open, feeling their gazes of disbelief digging into my back. In my room, I sat on the bed and took the new card out of my purse. I held it under the lamplight and saw my distorted reflection on its silver surface. This woman in the reflection, with her wrinkles and her gray hair, with her hands stained from years of work, this woman was me. And this woman had just taken the first real step toward her freedom. I hid the card in the same place where I had hidden the bank statements. Tomorrow would be Saturday. The day after, Sunday. And on Monday, the first of the month, when my pension landed in the new account and not the old one, my real battle would begin. But this time, I wouldn't be fighting with empty hands. This time I would have something they had underestimated for far too long: my own will to survive. I went to bed that night with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I knew that what was coming would be ugly, painful, probably devastating. But I also knew that there was no other choice. I had reached the end of a road, and the only possible direction was forward, toward the light, toward freedom, even if the price was losing the only people I had left in this world. Because in the end, what value did those people have if they only saw me as a means to finance their lives? What kind of love was it that only existed as long as the money flowed? The time had come to find out if there was anything real left under all that greed, or if I had lost my daughter long before I was willing to admit. The weekend passed in a strange tension. Jennifer and Mark looked at me with suspicion, as if they knew something had changed but couldn't pinpoint exactly what. I continued with my usual routine: cooking, cleaning, washing their clothes, but there was a subtle difference in how I did it. I no longer apologized for everything. I no longer bowed my head when Mark grumbled his complaints. On Sunday night, while I was preparing dinner, I heard Mark talking on the phone in the living room. His voice was tense, nervous. "I'm telling you, I need that loan by tomorrow." "Yeah, I know. Look, my mother-in-law helps us out every month, but there's a delay this time. It's just a few days." He lied with such naturalness, it sickened me. He was already looking for other ways to get money, anticipating problems he didn't even know were coming. I barely slept that night. I tossed and turned in bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing in my mind what I would say when the time came. The words felt heavy on my tongue, years of accumulated silence finally waiting to come out. At 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen to make myself a chamomile tea. I sat at the dark table, illuminated only by the light from the refrigerator, and held my mug with both hands. At this very table, Richard and I had shared thousands of breakfasts. At this table, I had helped Jennifer with her homework when she was a child. At this table, we had celebrated birthdays, Christmases, graduations. How had it come to this? At what point did love become a transaction? Monday dawned with a gray sky threatening rain. I got up early as always, but this time my stomach was in knots. I prepared breakfast in silence, listening to every noise in the house, waiting for the inevitable moment. Mark came down around 9, already dressed. "I'm going to the bank," he announced, grabbing the car keys. "I need to get some cash." He didn't look at me when he said it. He never looked at me when he talked about money, as if I were just an object from which to extract resources. "Have a good day," I said in a neutral voice, although my heart was beating so hard I thought he could hear it. Mark left, slamming the door, and I stood motionless by the stove, counting the minutes. Jennifer was still sleeping. She had come home late last night from an outing with friends, probably spending more money they didn't have on expensive cocktails and appetizers. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, organizing every object with millimeter precision, postponing the moment of going up to my room. Finally, I went up and took my new card out of its hiding place. I held it in my hands and took a deep breath. Somewhere in the city, Mark was in front of an ATM, inserting the old card, waiting for the bills to come out that he had been spending for 3 years without remorse. But this time, nothing would come out. This time, the machine would tell him there were no available funds. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, I heard the car arrive with a screech of tires. The door opened with such force that it hit the wall. Mark's footsteps pounded up the stairs like a stampede. "Jennifer! Jennifer, wake up!" His voice was laden with panic and fury. I heard Jennifer groan, still drowsy. "What's wrong? What time is it?" Her voice sounded irritated, confused. "The card doesn't work. There's no money in the account. Nothing. The ATM gave me an insufficient funds message. I tried 3 times and nothing." "What the hell is going on?" Mark was shouting now, his voice rising an octave with each word. There was a silence, then hurried footsteps. Jennifer must have been checking her phone, logging into the bank app. "It can't be," I heard her mutter. "It has to be a mistake. Mom's pension always arrives on the 1st of the month. Always. Well, it didn't arrive today, and our account is in the red. I have payments to make today. I promised Ivan money. What am I going to tell him? Mark sounded desperate now, his mask of control completely disintegrated. I'll call the bank, Jennifer said, and I could hear the fear in her voice. Fear that her source of income had dried up. Fear of having to face the consequences of 3 years of uncontrolled spending. I walked down the stairs slowly, holding onto the railing. Each step was deliberate, measured. When I reached the bottom, Jennifer was on the phone, still in her pajamas, with her hair disheveled and her face pale. Mark was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, cursing under his breath. Jennifer saw me, and her eyes locked on me with an intensity that would have been terrifying at another time. The bank says, "There's no mistake," she said slowly, lowering the phone. "It says the account is active, but it hasn't received any deposits this month." "That's impossible," Mark exploded. "Eleanor's pension always arrives on the 1st. Always." He turned to me with bloodshot eyes. "What did you do, old woman? Did you talk to someone? Was there a problem with your pension?" I took a deep breath, feeling all the fear, all the anxiety of the last few days, turn into a strange, cold calm. "There was no problem with my pension," I said in a clear, firm voice. In fact, it arrived right on time this morning. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the living room, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the beat of my own heart. "What?" Jennifer was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean it arrived?" "I mean exactly that," I replied, maintaining my upright posture even though my knees were trembling. "My pension arrived this morning. My $1,500 are safe in my account. My new account. An account that only I control." Mark took a step toward me, his fists clenched. "What did you do?" His voice was a low, dangerous growl. "You changed the account?" "When? Why?" "A week ago," I said, and there was something liberating in finally telling the truth. I went to the bank, opened a new account, and changed the information so my pension would be deposited there, where no one else can touch it. Jennifer brought her hands to her mouth. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and panic. "Mom, you can't do that. That money. We depend on that money. How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to eat?" I looked her in the eyes. My daughter, the child I had held in my arms, whom I had comforted during nightmares, whom I had applauded at every achievement. "The same way I had to manage for 42 years before I retired," I said in a firm voice. "By working," Mark exploded. "You are selfish. An ungrateful old woman. You lived under our roof. You ate our food. We gave you everything." He came so close I could see the veins throbbing in his neck. "Your roof?" I repeated, and now my voice rose too. "Your roof, Mark. This house has my name on the deed. This house that Richard and I bought 35 years ago. You came to live here because you had nowhere else to go. And instead of thanking me, you turned me into your maid and your ATM." I pulled the stack of papers from my purse that I had saved, the statements I had printed at the bank. I dropped them on the dining room table with a dull thud. "You want to talk about numbers? Let's talk. In 3 years, you have spent $60,000 of my pension. $60,000 that I earned with my sweat, with my blood, with my ruined health." Jennifer approached the papers with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, and I saw her face go from red to white. "Mom, we—" "You what?" I interrupted. "Did you think I would never find out? Or did you think I was too stupid, too old, too broken by Richard's death to defend myself?" My voice cracked slightly on my husband's name, but I recovered quickly. "Did you think you could just keep squeezing me until there was nothing left of me?" Mark snatched the papers from Jennifer's hands and began to leaf through them frantically. I saw his eyes move from left to right, recognizing every charge, every excessive expense, every luxury they had allowed themselves with my money. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, shame for a brief second, and then pure rage. "This doesn't prove anything," he said finally, though his voice had lost its conviction. "These are normal household expenses: food, utilities, maintenance." But we both knew he was lying. The numbers didn't lie. Normal expenses. I took the papers and pointed to a specific line. $1,200 at a jewelry store? Is that a normal expense, Mark? Or this $2,000 at a travel agency for a beach vacation that I wasn't invited to? My finger moved from line to line, exposing every lie, every deceit. Jennifer collapsed onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. Mom, please, we didn't want you to feel bad. We thought you wanted to help us. You always said family was first. Family is first, I repeated, feeling the words burn my throat. But you didn't treat me like family, Jennifer. You treated me like a resource, like a source of money you could exploit without consequences. You're exaggerating, Mark shouted, slamming his fist on the table. We gave you a place to live. We gave you food. We gave you company. You gave me a room the size of a closet, I said, feeling decades of pain concentrating in my chest. You put me to work like a servant in my own house. You made me feel like I was a burden, that I should be grateful for the crumbs of affection you threw me. And all while you spent my money on luxuries I could never afford. Jennifer looked up, streams of ruined makeup staining her cheeks. What are we supposed to do now, Mom? We have debts, commitments. We can't just live without your help. It's not my help, I corrected her firmly. It's my money, my pension, the fruit of 42 years of work that you and your husband have been systematically stealing. The word stealing hung in the air like an undeniable accusation. Mark took a threatening step toward me. Be careful what you say, old woman. Stealing is a very strong word. You could get into trouble making accusations like that. Are you threatening me? I asked, and to my surprise, I felt no fear. I only felt a cold, calculated fury. Because I have all these documents. I have proof of every dollar you took from my account without my explicit permission. I have the signature you made me put on those bank papers, telling me it was to simplify things. You want to talk about legal trouble, Mark? He recoiled slightly, the reality of the situation finally penetrating his brain. Jennifer was looking at him with wide eyes, probably calculating the implications of what I was saying. You wouldn't go to the police, Jennifer said in a trembling voice. You wouldn't do that. I'm your daughter. You are my daughter. I nodded, feeling my heart break as I said the next words. And precisely because of that, I am giving you a chance you don't deserve. I'm not going to the police. I'm not going to report you. But from now on, my money is mine alone. And what are we supposed to do? Mark had gone from rage to a kind of pathetic desperation. We have $15,000 in credit card debt. The bank is pressuring us. Ivan is going to kill me if I don't pay him what I owe. Those are your problems, I said with a firmness that surprised me. Problems you created yourselves, living beyond your means. I am not responsible for your bad financial decisions. Jennifer shot up from the sofa. I can't believe you're so cruel. What happened to you? The mom I knew would never do this. You're abandoning us. Her voice was rising, hysterical. I'm abandoning you? I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Me? Jennifer, you abandoned me 3 years ago when you decided I was only worth what I could provide financially. You abandoned me every time you made me feel like a burden. You abandoned me when you turned my grief over your father's death into an opportunity to exploit me. That's not true, she shouted, but her eyes said otherwise. She knew it was true. Somewhere deep down, she knew it. Mark started pacing again, running his hands through his hair. There has to be a solution. Eleanor, let's be reasonable. We can reach an agreement. We'll give you an allowance. You can keep some of your money, but we need you to contribute. It's only fair. Fair. The word almost made me laugh. You want to talk about fairness? Fine, let's talk about fairness. For 3 years, I cooked, cleaned, washed, ironed, and on top of that, paid all your bills. I did the work of a full-time maid without so much as a thank you. Do you know how much a full-time maid costs? Around $1,200 a month. Multiply that by 36 months, and that's $43,000 you owe me for my work. Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, but I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. Add that to the $60,000 of my pension that you spent, and you owe me over $100,000. So don't talk to me about fairness, Mark. Not when the only injustice here has been what you two did to me. The silence that followed was absolute. They were left without arguments, without defenses, naked before the truth I had just exposed. I saw Jennifer look at Mark, searching for support, but he was pale as a ghost. "So, what?" Jennifer finally asked in a small voice. "Are you going to kick us out of your house?" The question hung in the air. I had been waiting for them to ask it. "This is my house," I said slowly, "and you are welcome to stay if you want. But under my terms. You will pay rent. You will buy your own food. You will clean up your own messes. And you will not see a single dollar more of my pension." "Rent?" Mark almost choked on the word. "You're going to charge us rent? We're family." "Exactly," I replied. "And if you truly consider me family and not just a source of income, then there shouldn't be a problem with contributing equally to the household expenses." Jennifer started sobbing again, but this time the sobs sounded different, less manipulative, more genuine. "Mom, we can't pay rent. We can barely pay our debts." "Then I suggest Mark get a job," I said, not softening my words. "Or that you get a better one, or that you sell that sports car you bought last year. There are solutions, Jennifer. It's just that none of those solutions are me." Mark looked at me with pure hatred. "You are a bitter, selfish old woman. Your husband would be ashamed of you." The mention of Richard hit me like a physical punch. For a moment, the pain was so intense I almost recoiled. But then I thought of Richard, of the man he had been, of his values, of his integrity, and I knew exactly what he would have thought of this situation. "Richard would have been ashamed," I said, my voice trembling but firm, "but of you, of how you treated his wife, of how you took advantage of her grief, of how you turned her into a slave in her own home. Richard never would have allowed this." I turned around and started to climb the stairs to my room. "You have until the end of the month to decide," I said without looking back. "Either you pay $800 in rent and start behaving like respectful tenants, or you find another place to live." Behind me, I heard Jennifer collapse into sobs and Mark curse under his breath. I heard the sound of papers being thrown and something shattering against the floor. But I kept walking, step by step, until I reached my small room and closed the door behind me. I sat on my bed, shaking from head to toe. I had done it. I had finally done it. I had spoken all the truths I had been holding back for 3 years. And although my heart ached as if it had been ripped from my chest, I also felt something else. Something light and fragile, but undeniably real. I felt hope. The following days were a hell of Cold War. Jennifer and Mark barely spoke to me. They ate in silence when I was present, or they just locked themselves in their room with food they bought outside. The house felt like a minefield where any movement could set off an explosion. But I had made a decision, and I wasn't going to back down. For the first time in 3 years, I bought food just for myself. I kept my things on a separate shelf in the refrigerator with a note that said Eleanor. I felt ridiculous doing it, like a suspicious roommate, but it was necessary. I needed to establish boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. On the 3rd day after the confrontation, I heard Jennifer crying in her room. My maternal instinct urged me to go up, to comfort her, to fix things as I had always done. But I forced myself to stay seated in the kitchen, sipping my tea, reminding myself that comforting her now would be surrendering. It would be returning to the same old pattern where I gave in, and they won. Mark tried a different tactic on the 4th day. He came into the kitchen where I was making my lunch and sat at the table with a contrite expression. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said in a tone that I suppose was meant to sound conciliatory. "Talk," I replied, without stopping my vegetable chopping for my salad. "Look, I know things got out of control. I admit it, but we're family. We should be able to resolve this in a civilized way." His words sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced them in front of the mirror. "I am being civilized," I said, turning to look at him. "I gave you clear options: pay rent and contribute equally, or find another place. I don't see what's uncivilized about that." $800 is too much," he protested. "You know we don't have that money." $800 for a room in this area of the city is a bargain," I replied firmly. "And if you don't have that money, then I suggest you adjust your expenses. Cancel the streaming services. Sell the giant television. Stop eating out. like I had to do for years when Richard and I were paying for this house. Mark clenched his jaw. Jennifer is in a bad way. She cries all the time. She says you're rejecting her, that you don't love her anymore. Those words pierced me like knives, but I held my ground. I love my daughter. I will always love her. But loving someone doesn't mean you let them destroy you. It doesn't mean you let them use you until there's nothing left. She never meant to hurt you, Mark insisted, but even he seemed not to believe his own words. Maybe not, I conceded. Maybe you never stopped to think about what you were doing to me, but that doesn't change the fact that you did it. And now, you have to live with the consequences. Mark stood up abruptly. You're impossible. I don't know how Richard put up with you all those years. And he stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me shaking with contained rage. That night, while I was in my room reading, I heard a soft knock on my door. Mom? It was Jennifer's voice, small and broken. Can I come in? I hesitated for a moment before answering. Come in. Jennifer entered and stood by the door, wringing her hands nervously. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her face was pale. For a moment, I saw the little girl she had been, scared and vulnerable, and my heart softened dangerously. What do you need? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I wanted to apologize, she said, and the tears began to roll down her cheeks. You're right. About everything. Mark and we took advantage of you. We used you. And I'm so sorry. Mom, I'm really, truly sorry. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But there was something in the way she avoided my gaze, something in the tone of her voice that made me doubt. Are you sorry because you recognize it was wrong? I asked softly. Or are you sorry because now there are consequences? Jennifer let out a sob. Does it matter? I'm saying I'm sorry. Isn't that enough? No, I replied, and the word came out harder than I intended. It's not enough. Because I've seen this pattern before, Jennifer. Since you were a child, you'd do something wrong, you'd cry, you'd apologize, and everything would go back to normal. But this time, it can't be like that. This time, apologies aren't enough. Then what do you want from me? Her voice rose, frustration replacing the sadness. What do I have to do for you to forgive me? I want you to change, I said simply. I want Mark to get a job. I want you to take responsibility for your debts. I want you to treat me like a person, not an ATM. And I want that if you're going to live in my house, you contribute like responsible adults. You're asking too much, Jennifer exploded. We can't do all of that overnight. I'm not asking you to do it overnight, I replied calmly. You have until the end of the month. That's 3 weeks. Enough time for Mark to find at least a temporary job. Enough time for you to make a budget and decide if you can afford to stay here. Jennifer looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and pain. And if we can't? Would you really kick us out onto the street? Your own daughter. If you can't pay $800 in rent here, I said, feeling my voice break, then you need to find a cheaper place. A small apartment. A room in a shared house. There are options, Jennifer. It's just that none of those options include living off my pension. She stood there for a long moment, looking at me as if I were a stranger. And I suppose, in a way, I was. I was no longer the submissive mother she had known. I was no longer the woman who swallowed pain and humiliation to keep the peace. I don't recognize you, Jennifer finally said in a cold voice. This isn't you. You're right, I replied. This isn't the woman you turned into your servant. This is the woman I should have been from the beginning. The woman your father would have wanted me to be. Jennifer left the room without another word, closing the door harder than necessary. I sat on my bed, feeling the tears roll down my cheeks. This was harder than I had imagined. Much harder. But then I remembered the bank statements. I remembered the nights crying in silence while they laughed in the living room. I remembered every humiliation, every moment I felt invisible and worthless. And I knew I couldn't give up now, not after coming this far. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang around 10. When I opened the door, I found a beautiful young woman of about 25 with a warm smile. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. "Grandma?" she said. And then I remembered. Chloe, my granddaughter. The daughter Jennifer had when she was young, before she married Mark. Chloe, who had gone away to college in another city 5 years ago, and with whom I had lost contact. Chloe, my heart leaped. "What are you doing here? Can I come in?" she asked, looking inside the house cautiously. I let her in, confused but happy to see her. We sat in the living room, and Chloe took my hands in hers. "Grandma, I need to talk to you about something important," she said seriously. "And Mom can't know I'm here." My heart began to beat faster. "What's wrong, honey?" Chloe took a deep breath. "Grandma, I've been talking to my Aunt Brenda, your friend from your old apartment building. She told me you haven't been to visit her in 3 years. I got worried and started looking into it." She paused, her eyes full of concern. "Grandma, what's been happening to you?" And then, for the first time since it all began, I broke down. I told Chloe everything. Every painful detail, every humiliation, every stolen dollar. She listened to me in silence, squeezing my hands, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. "I knew something was wrong," she said when I finished. "Mom always made excuses when I asked about you. She said you were busy, you were tired, you didn't want to talk. But something didn't add up." She looked me directly in the eyes. "Grandma, you can't stay here. It's not safe. It's not healthy." "Where would I go?" I asked, feeling the weight of my age for the first time in days. Chloe smiled. "With me, or back to your house, or with Brenda. She said she'd be thrilled to have you. You have options, Grandma. You're not trapped here." Her words were like a light in the darkness. I wasn't alone. I hadn't been alone all this time. There were people who truly cared about me. Not about my money, but about me. Chloe's visit changed everything. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had an ally, someone who saw me as a human being and not a resource. We spent the whole morning talking, planning, rebuilding the relationship that Jennifer had systematically sabotaged with her excuses and lies. "Mom always said you were too tired for visitors," Chloe told me sadly, "that your health was fragile and you needed rest." I believed her. "Grandma, I thought I was protecting you by not bothering you. I was never too tired for you," I told her, squeezing her hands. "Jennifer kept you away from me because she knew you would see what was really happening. You were always more observant, more critical of her decisions." Chloe nodded slowly. "I always had my doubts about Mark. From the day Mom introduced him to me, I didn't like something about him. The way he talked about money, about success, as if they were the only things that mattered in life." She paused. "Did you know he asked me for money once? 2 years ago. $200 that he said he urgently needed. I had just started working, and it was all I had saved." "Did you give it to him?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Yes," she admitted with embarrassment. "And he never paid me back. When I reminded him months later, he got angry. He said I was selfish, that families should help each other without expecting anything in return. That's when I started to distance myself. I stopped coming around as often, and Mom didn't do anything to stop it. We were so absorbed in our conversation that we didn't hear Jennifer come down the stairs. Her voice startled us both. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" Chloe stood up slowly, facing her mother with an expression I had never seen on her before. It was disappointment mixed with contained anger. "I came to see my grandmother, Mom. Something I should have done a long time ago." Jennifer entered the living room with cautious steps. "I don't understand. I told you Grandma was fine. Why didn't you call me before you came?" "Because Brenda told me some interesting things," Chloe replied in a firm voice. "About how Grandma hasn't visited her own house in 3 years. About how you stopped answering my calls when I asked about her. About how every time I wanted to visit, you made excuses." Jennifer's face turned pale. "I was just protecting her. Your grandmother has been going through a difficult time since Grandpa died. She needed space." "She needed space?" Chloe repeated with disbelief. "Or did you need no one to notice what you and Mark were doing to her? What is that supposed to mean?" Jennifer's voice rose defensively. "It means I found out about everything, Mom." Chloe crossed her arms. "Grandma told me about the money, about how you treated her, about how you turned her into your maid while you emptied her bank account." Jennifer looked at me with eyes full of betrayal. "You told her? Her? Why would you do that? To turn her against me. I didn't turn her against you, I replied wearily. You did that yourself with your actions. Chloe came here worried about me, and I told her the truth. Something I should have done a long time ago. Mark appeared at that moment, still in his pajamas even though it was almost noon. What's all this shouting? He asked with irritation. Then he saw Chloe, and his expression changed. Oh, you. Yes, me, Chloe said coldly. The family member you two prefer to keep away. Now I understand why. Look, kid, Mark began in a condescending tone. You don't understand the whole situation. Your grandmother is confused, mixing things up. I am not confused, I intervened before Chloe could respond. And I have all the bank statements to prove every word I said. I got up and went to my room, returning with the copies I had saved. I gave them to Chloe. Read for yourself. Chloe took the papers and began to review them. I saw her eyes widen with every page, her jaw tighten, her hands begin to tremble slightly. When she finished, she looked at her mother with an expression I had never seen on her face. It was pure disgust. $60,000, she said in a trembling voice. In 3 years. Mom, how could you? She's your mother. She raised you alone after my biological father left. She worked 2 jobs to give you a good education. And this is how you repay her. You don't understand, Jennifer said, tears beginning to roll. We had debts, problems. She wanted to help. She wanted to help. Or you manipulated her into giving you access to her money? Chloe threw the papers on the table. I saw the charges, Mom. Expensive restaurants, jewelry, vacations, designer clothes. While Grandma lived in a room the size of a closet and wore the same worn-out clothes. Mark tried to intervene. Listen, Chloe, this is an adult matter. You don't need to get involved in. An adult matter? Chloe turned on him with fury. Financially exploiting a vulnerable elderly person is an adult matter? Do you know what that's called legally? Elder abuse. It's a crime. The silence that followed was heavy. I saw Jennifer and Mark exchange panicked glances. Chloe had said out loud what I had been too afraid to admit even to myself. What they had done to me wasn't just immoral. It was illegal. No one is going to involve the police, Jennifer said quickly. This is a family misunderstanding. We'll resolve it internally. Like you've been resolving it so far? Chloe asked sarcastically. Grandma, come with me, now. Pack your things. You're coming to my apartment. Chloe, no, Jennifer protested. You can't just take her. This is her house. Exactly, Chloe said. It's her house, not yours. And I think it's time for Grandma to decide who stays and who goes. All eyes turned to me. It was the moment of truth. The decision that would change everything. I could feel the weight of 3 years of pain, of humiliation, of forced silence pressing on my shoulders. Chloe is right, I said finally, my voice sounding stronger than I felt. This is my house, the house Richard and I bought together, the house where we raised Jennifer, and I think it's time for it to truly be my home again. Mom, no, Jennifer whispered. Please, don't do this. You have until the end of the month, I continued, ignoring her plea. As I already told you, you can stay if you pay rent and start contributing equally. Or you can find another place. But I am no longer going to be your source of income. Mark took a step toward me with clenched fists, but Chloe immediately stepped between us. Don't even think about it, she said in a dangerously low voice. Touch her, and I swear I'll call the police right now. Mark backed down, but his gaze was full of hatred. This is your fault, he spat at me. You brought this brat into our business. You destroyed this family. No, I said firmly. You destroyed this family when you decided I was worth more dead than alive. When you looked at me and saw only dollar signs instead of a person. When you turned my grief into your opportunity. Jennifer collapsed on the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her as I had thousands of times when she was a child. But another part, the new, stronger part that had awakened in the bank 2 weeks ago, held firm. Chloe took my arm gently. Come on, Grandma. Let's go pack some of your things. You'll stay with me this week, while we decide on the next steps. I don't need to stay with you, I said, surprising myself. This is my house. If anyone has to leave, it's them." Chloe smiled with pride. "That's the spirit, Grandma." I looked at Jennifer and Mark one last time. "You have 2 weeks," I said in a clear voice. "Start looking for jobs, make a budget, decide if you can stay under my conditions. Or pack your things and find another place. The decision is yours." I climbed the stairs with Chloe by my side, leaving behind Jennifer's sobs and Mark's muffled curses. With every step I took, I felt the weight of 3 years lifting from my shoulders. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if Jennifer and I could ever repair our relationship. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking forward instead of just surviving. In my room, Chloe helped me organize my few belongings. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she said, folding my clothes. "I know this isn't easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," I admitted, "but also the most necessary." 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of my house, my real house, the one Richard and I had built together, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. The garden that had been neglected for 3 years was now blooming again. I had replanted the roses Richard loved so much, and every morning their scent reminded me that life could be beautiful even after loss. Jennifer and Mark had left 2 weeks after my ultimatum. They didn't pay rent, they didn't really look for work, they just packed their things in the middle of the night and left without saying goodbye. I found a note on the kitchen table. "I hope you're happy alone," it said in Jennifer's tight handwriting. There was no signature, no goodbye. Just that one sentence full of bitterness. The first few days after they left were strange. The house felt too quiet, too big. I would wake up in the early hours expecting to hear their voices, their footsteps, even their complaints. But slowly, that silence transformed into peace. I learned to enjoy my mornings without rushing, my meals without criticism, my afternoons without demands. Chloe came to visit me every weekend. We cooked together, watched old movies, talked about everything and nothing. She would tell me about her job as a graphic designer, about her dreams of opening her own studio one day. I would tell her stories from when I was young, about her grandparents, about the life I had lived before getting lost in grief. Brenda also came back into my life. My dearest friend, whom I had abandoned without realizing it when I moved in with Jennifer. She held no grudge against me. She welcomed me with open arms and tears in her eyes. "I missed you so much," she told me that first day I went to visit her. "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to help you. I didn't know how to ask for help either," I admitted. I had convinced myself that I deserved everything that was happening to me, that it was my obligation to sacrifice myself for my daughter. Brenda took my hands, her brown eyes full of the wisdom of her 73 years. "Sacrifice isn't love when it's done at the cost of your own dignity, Eleanor. That's self-destruction." As the months went by, I began to rediscover who I was beyond being a mother, beyond being a widow. I joined a book club at the local library. I started taking a watercolor class at the community center. Small, simple things. But they made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. My pension, that $1,500 a month that used to disappear into others' accounts, was now mine to manage. I paid my bills, bought quality food, allowed myself small luxuries like new books or fresh flowers for the house. I even started saving. For the first time in 3 years, I had a financial cushion that grew every month. One day, 2 months after they left, I received a message from Jennifer. It was brief, cold. "I need you to lend me $5,000. It's an emergency." Not even a hello, not a question about how I was. Just a demand disguised as a request. I replied after thinking about it for a whole night. "No, Jennifer, I am not going to lend you money. If you have a real emergency, seek help from social services or friends. But my money is no longer available to you." Her response was instant and venomous. "I knew you were selfish. I wish Dad were alive to see what you've become." I blocked her number after reading that, not out of anger, but out of self-protection. Every message from her was a hook, trying to drag me back into the toxic pattern we had. Chloe hugged me when I told her. "You did the right thing, Grandma. Mom needs to hit rock bottom before she can really change, and you helping her only delays that. Do you think we'll ever be able to fix our relationship?" I asked her in a small voice, because despite everything, Jennifer was still my daughter. Chloe thought for a moment. Maybe, but only if she truly recognizes what she did. Not just empty apologies because she needs something. A real acknowledgement of the damage she caused. And that might take years, Grandma. Or it might never happen. I learned to live with that uncertainty. Some days were harder than others. I would see mothers and daughters walking together in the park and feel a pang of pain. I would hear Brenda talking on the phone with her children and wonder if I would ever have those conversations with Jennifer again. But then I would look around my house, truly mine now, filled with things I had chosen. I looked at my bank account with its growing balance. I looked at the watercolor paintings I had created, imperfect but made with love, and I knew I had made the right decision. One spring afternoon, while I was watering Richard's roses, I heard someone knock on the door. When I opened it, I found Jennifer standing on the step. She looked different. Thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, without the perfect makeup she always wore. Her clothes were simple, worn. "Hi, Mom," she said in a trembling voice. "Jennifer." My voice came out colder than I intended, but it was an automatic defense mechanism. Can I come in? I just want to talk. I promise I didn't come to ask for anything." Her eyes were filled with genuine tears, so different from the manipulative tears I had seen before. I let her in, although every instinct screamed at me to be cautious. We sat in the living room, with a considerable space between us on the sofa. "Mark and I separated," Jennifer began, looking at her hands. 2 months ago. It turned out he had more debts than I knew about. Gambling debts. We lost the apartment we rented. I'm living with a friend now. I got a second job. I'm trying to pay off everything we owe. I waited in silence, offering no solutions, not trying to fix her problems. "I didn't come to ask you for money," she continued. "I came to tell you that you were right, about everything. I used you. I treated you horribly. I took advantage of your grief over Dad's death and turned you into something you weren't. I took away your dignity. The tears were flowing freely now, and I'm sorry." "God, Mom, I'm so sorry." "Why now?" I asked softly. "Why are you coming to tell me this now?" "Because I hit rock bottom," she admitted. "Because I lost everything. Because I finally understood what I did to you when someone did the same thing to me." She looked up, her red eyes meeting mine. "Mark left me with nothing, Mom. Exactly like I left you. And when I felt used, discarded, invisible, I finally understood." We sat in silence for a long moment. Part of me wanted to hug her, to forgive her immediately, to be her protective mother again. But the wiser part, the one that had fought so hard to emerge, knew that true forgiveness required more than words. "I appreciate your apology," I said finally. "I really do. But apologies are just the beginning, Jennifer. I need to see real change. I need time to heal. I need to know that you won't go back to seeing me as a solution to your problems." "I understand," she nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me today. I just wanted you to know that I finally get it, and that I'm going to work on being better. Not for you, but for me." We talked for 2 hours that day. It was painful, honest, raw. I told her how I had felt during those 3 years. She told me about her own fears and weaknesses that had led her to justify her actions. We didn't end up as best friends. We didn't hug and promise that everything was fixed. But it was a start. When she left, I sat on my porch again, holding my now cold coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Richard's roses swayed gently in the breeze. I didn't know if Jennifer and I would ever get back what we had lost. I didn't know if she would really change, or if this was just another temporary pattern. But I did know one thing for certain. I had changed. I had found my voice, my value, my right to exist as more than just a means to others' ends. It had taken me 69 years to learn that self-love is not selfishness, that setting boundaries is not cruelty, that saying no when necessary is an act of survival, not meanness. I looked at my reflection in the window. I saw a woman with honestly earned wrinkles, with gray hair she no longer dyed to please others, with eyes that had cried but that now shone with something new. Freedom. "Richard," I whispered to the wind. I finally did it. I finally stood up for myself. And somewhere, In my most precious memories, I could hear his voice telling me what he had always said. I'm proud of you, my love. I went into my house, my home, closed the door behind me, and smiled. Because today, I didn't need anyone's permission to live. Today, I didn't have to apologize for existing. Today, I was simply Eleanor, and that was more than enough.